Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the Relationship Schools podcast here. I'm your host, Jason Gaddis, and I'm grateful to be here as always. Yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing with your friends. Thanks for commenting on social media when you have an opinion, a pushback, or inspiration, or you're moved in some way. So thank you. And thanks for your reviews on Apple Podcasts. We are climbing up toward the mid 600s. That's cool. My goal is let's go to 1,000 reviews, comments from you. Okay. You can help us out. Just scroll up with your thumb on Apple Podcasts and do 5 stars if that's true for you, and then say a couple words would be awesome. All right. It's a small thing you can do for us. All right. If you haven't done that yet, if you've gotten value here. If you haven't gotten value, obviously don't do that. Okay. My guest today is Wayne Baker. He's an American author and sociologist on the senior faculty of the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. His teaching and research interests are in the fields of values, American society, social capital, social networks, and economic sociology. He's done a ton of research around economic sociology, and he demonstrated where financial markets operate as social networks. So this guy's really interesting, and today we talk about a lot of things. Team culture at work. This is a little more leaning towards a work kind of podcast. So if you work for a team, if you're a business owner, if you're a boss, a manager, a leader of some kind, I think this is going to be really valuable for you. Yeah. We talked about the 4 pathways or elements of high quality connection, especially in the workplace, but also applies at home, of course. And then we spent some time on values. We talked briefly about masks, wearing masks as an example, and even just the intense situation we're going through around racism right now. So this is good, and I think you're going to enjoy it. And stay tuned to the end, of course, for your action step. All right, enjoy. Okay, welcome to the show, Wayne Baker.
Well, thank you, Jason. I'm glad to be here and have an opportunity to talk with you.
Yeah.
And
I'm just psyched you're here. So give the listener a quick intro of what are you up to in the world right now?
Well, I'm sitting in my home office in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I teach at the University of Michigan in the Ross School of Business, where I've been a professor for 25 years now.
Wow.
If you can believe that. We moved here from Chicago. I used to teach at the University of Chicago before moving here to Michigan. This is where our one child was born in the U of M hospitals. He's 18 now. He just told me this afternoon that he's finished all his high school requirements and he's graduating virtually, and none of the rites of passage that so many kids are going through as well. And he's wondering what college is going to be like when he starts in the fall.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's wild. So you've been you've been parenting for many years, a couple decades here almost. And I'm guessing learned a lot in that process.
Yeah, I learned that they don't come with an instruction manual.
Yeah, that's for
And
sure.
I've also learned that your pledge to not do what your parents did is not very helpful because it doesn't tell you what to do.
Uh-huh.
So there's a lot of learning on the spot, applying what you know. Another role I have here is I'm faculty director at our Center for Positive Organizations. I kind of think about positive psychology, but applied at the organizational level. I've learned a lot from that about focusing on strengths and, high quality connections, good relationships among people. So I've really tried to apply a lot of what I've learned from my association with the center here at home.
Yeah. Yeah. There's major crossover, I'm sure. I want to get into that a little bit. What exactly are you teaching at the University of Michigan? Like, if I'm a student in your class, what kind of things am I learning there?
So I teach MBAs and Ph.D. students, and so I'll focus on my MBA students. I prefer to teach those who are working full-time, so that means I'll teach in our weekend MBA program or our evening MBA program, and I prefer that because if you give them something useful, they can apply it and tell you the next week whether it worked or not.
Yeah.
And so it's really rewarding and very, I find that a really great environment to be working in. And if you're the classes I teach are all They're all conscripts. They're required to take the course. It's not an elective. They have to take it. And I'd say there's a bell curve when I think about the students and their interest in the course. There's a few who are really excited about it. There are some who really hate the idea of being there. And most of them are in the middle, kind of with a wait and see attitude.
Yeah.
And so I teach from the positive organizational scholarship perspective from even before they see me all the way to the end. Every week we're talking about another topic. So it could be managing your energy, high quality connections and reciprocity, the strengths perspective. I have them do an exercise where they have to go out to their network of people, ask them for stories about when they saw them at their best, and then distill their core strengths from that. That'd be an example. We look at high performance teams, a whole number of subjects, but it's always from that focus of positive psychology and positive organizational scholarship.
Yeah, so cool. And how did you get into this? If we rewind a little bit, it sounds like you've been teaching many years. And I'm curious how you got into this particular subject. Like, why this subject out of everything else? What was going on in your life that had you want to pursue this?
Well, I'd always done research on social networks and social capital from very early on when I did my dissertation at Northwestern University. But when I came to Michigan, I was very fortunate to come at a time when a couple of faculty were starting to come together with some radical ideas. I think radical from an academic point of view, thinking about positive psychology, what that means at the organizational level. And there were 3 or 4 of my colleagues who were actually using some of my work in their presentations. So one thing that we do with social network analysis is that we map people's networks. And with a colleague, Rob Cross, who's now at Babson, we were figuring out how to map energy flows among people. And these energy maps are really quite revealing. And so somebody said, they're showing those energy maps when they give presentations. Well, there's nothing more flattering than to have one of your colleagues using your work. So I went and talked to him and I said, what's going on? What are you doing? This was back in like 2001, 2002. And they described the idea and I said, well, sign me up. I said, I just think this is a really powerful idea. And I have to say it revitalized my teaching, reoriented my research. And that's what I've done for almost 20 years now, is really work on how to develop that whole perspective, make it useful for people.
Yeah, that's powerful. So describe, for the listener that doesn't know what this is, this was a new term for me that I had to look up before interviewing you, social capital. What does that mean?
Well, you think about 2 kinds of resources that you need to be productive, to be creative or effective. It's your human capital and your social capital. So human capital is what you know, your skills, experiences, the kinds of things that show up on your resume. Social capital comes from the network of relationships that you have. They could be formal ones or informal relationships, work-related relationships, professional, friends, whatever it might be. We all have a network that's out there.
Yeah.
Well, that network is very valuable in lots of ways. It's the way in which we get information, the way that we get resources, ideas, support, energy, and so on. So you really need both of those. You need the human capital, what you know, but you also need that network. And I don't think about it. It's not like, sometimes people say it's not what you know, it's who you know. I think that's a very superficial gloss on all of it. Really, that we have a network of relationships and we can invest in those relationships. Those relationships will be useful for us in a very positive way. You need both of those.
Yeah.
Human capital and your social capital.
Yeah, cool. And then you mentioned the sort of social network, and you mentioned energy. So describe that. Like, I have my own kind of ideas popping up of what that means, but in terms of how energy moves through, say, a social network, I'm assuming. So what does that look like?
Well, at an individual level, you can think of physical energy, and that's glucose, right? That gets broken down, and that's part of your physical energy. But there's also the subjective experience of energy. So people, we know when we feel emotionally up or we feel emotionally down, we feel energized, we don't feel energized, and it may have nothing to do with our glucose levels. One thing we found is that it has to do with our interactions with other people. So when you interact with someone, that person could buoy you up, that after that interaction, you feel re-energized and revitalized, or it can really bring you down.
Yeah.
And so when we realized that, we started adding a question to our network surveys. Network surveys always ask you about, all right, who do you interact with, and who do you go to for information? Who do you go to for advice? Who do you socialize with informally? Those are all different questions you can ask. So we added a question that was a very simple one that says that typically when you interact with that person, how does it affect your energy level? Do you find that person to be very energizing, very de-energizing, or somewhere in between? And that became the basis for drawing these energy maps. We also learned that where you are in the energy map is related to your productivity, to your performance, in a very, very interesting way, which is the more energizing you are of other people, the higher your performance. You might wonder, why would energizing other people increase your performance? When you think about that, if you energize other people, they want to work with you. They want to share information with you. They want to be on your team. They have your best interests at heart because you elevate their energy. And for all those reasons, you're more productive.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about myself as a CEO, and sometimes I'm not bringing that vibe, right? Because I'm have all this stress and I'm overwhelmed, or I'm juggling so many balls. But it's really tangible when I'm, let's say, irritable, or when I'm under-resourced, and then I'm interacting with my team, for example, and how that doesn't help them like at all. So versus what you're saying is like, if I can bring energy to, and maybe enthusiasm or excitement or whatever to the team, like how much more productive they're going to be, which helps me, right, feel even better.
That's right. And it's important to realize that you can't be energizing all the time.
Yeah.
People have bad days, they have down days. We have a ratio, there's kind of a threshold, 3-to-1, which is that if you have, on average, over time, 3 positive interactions for every negative one, then that's a good sign. That's kind of the threshold. You want to have more than that, but it acknowledges the fact that you can't be energizing all the time. You can't be the source of energy for other people all the time.
Yeah, of course.
And that sometimes you just have a bad day.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's really true that there are some people in our lives that lift us up and drain us. Either way, it's like they lift us up and buoy us, as you said, and other people drain us. What I'm also curious if you teach your students practical tips on what to do. Like, I'm just thinking about the listener right now. Is there anything, if they have someone in their life that's draining them, is there some tip or technique that you advise?
Well, it's really interesting. I can think back to a very de-energizing relationship I had with another professor years ago. It wasn't here at the University of Michigan. It was someplace else. And every time I was in a meeting with this person, I felt angry. I felt de-energized. And sometimes I couldn't even like talk. It's like, there's something about this. And for a long time, I always blamed the other person. There was something about what they did. And then over time, I realized, I said, in every relationship, there's 2 sides. Yeah. And, maybe there's something that I'm doing that's helping to contribute to this bad relationship, to this de-energizing connection. And I realized that whenever I was in a meeting with this person, I had my defenses up. So I came across as like really cold, very defensive. And I realized that I was at least part of the problem.
Yeah.
Right. And I have some control over what I can do. And so I actually I ran into this person in the stairway, and I actually had a heart-to-heart conversation. I said, I know there's been something between us. I would just like it to be better. I don't know what it is, but here's what I'm doing, is that I realize that I'm very defensive. I realize that I have my guard up all the time, and I'm going to try not to do that. And that was the beginning of what became not only a much improved relationship, but a positive relationship, a more energizing relationship with that person.
Yeah. So the takeaway there for me is you took action and you took a risk and you went vulnerable, right? And owned something that was happening for you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. And in any relationship, there's always 2 sides. Now, it could be that most of the problem is caused by the other person. I mean, factually, that might be true, but there's always something that we can do. That we're always a party to that relationship.
Yeah, I'm so with you there. I want to bring in the conversation that we're both in around the culture right now in society, and COVID-19, and then also the racism. And I'm curious how you are relating to this with not only your students, but yourself, and and the systems that you teach in terms of human capital and social, capital and networking and all that. It's got to be impacting, you and your world tremendously here. And I'm just curious.
Oh, it absolutely has. We're not in class right now, but some of my colleagues are. And at our Center for Positive Organizations, we've been talking about that all week. I mean, this horrific killing of yet another African American citizen, at the hands of the police. It's like, when is this going to stop?
I know, it's so upsetting. Yeah.
And we were I was in a meeting, and I said, one of the things I've said that when you're in any kind of meeting, but especially a virtual meeting, it's important to acknowledge reality. There's a pandemic. George Floyd just got murdered. Right? What's going on? It's like to at least acknowledge what's going on. Otherwise, it's denying the reality of people's experience and expecting them to just divorce that when they're in the meeting. And so I started a meeting. I said, look, I want to acknowledge the reality of it. I don't know what to do right now, but we will somehow figure out what we can do, how we can take action.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exactly. I mean, and I love what you said, like, it's even like meeting a friend, like, hey, how are you doing with what's going on in the world, is versus getting right to whatever you're supposed to talk about, There's a way in which we're acknowledging it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like even in an email, almost every email I get or I send says something about, how are you, or stay healthy, stay sane, be safe out there. And we often don't know what to do, but those little messages really do matter. Because I'll get another email, which would be like the normal email, the pre-pandemic email I would get, all business.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I get it, but it's like there's something kind of missing, right? At least I think you'd say something.
Yeah. Maybe you could give me some coaching there. I can be, my team would probably say notoriously sort of curt. Hey, do this. Hey, do that. Without the hellos and the hey, take cares, and it's my story sometimes is I'm too busy, right? Or I'm going really fast, or I've always got some bullshit excuse. So what would you, any advice there?
And so my colleague, Jane Dutton, who was one of the founders of our Center for Positive Organizations, has a concept of high quality connections. And there are 4 parts to that. I could list them quickly and we'll talk about 1 or 2. So respectful engagement, trusting, task enabling, and player fun. So respectful engagement means engaging with another person that conveys a sense of value and worth. Now, it's interesting to know is that it often doesn't take more time to do that. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it takes a little bit more time. But you think about when you go to work in the morning and if you think back to the pre-pandemic, you'd walk into the office, do acknowledge everyone. It's like there are a lot of the people who do what's called the invisible work are never acknowledged, mm-hmm. right? No one ever looks them in the eye and says, good morning, or how you doing? Or, somebody will come into my classroom and they'll clean the board, Yeah. And I will always go out of my way. It doesn't take any more time. I'll go out of my way and say, hey, thanks. I really appreciate you doing that. That makes it easier for me to do my job.
Yeah.
And they're usually shocked, right, that someone actually spoke to them.
Yeah.
That's an example of respectful engagement, but it doesn't take more time.
Okay.
Sometimes it just takes using the time you have a little differently.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Love it. Well, and you had 2 more. What were the other 2?
So there's respectful engagement, there's trusting, task enabling, and play. So trusting is interesting because trusting means through your words and deeds, conveying the sense that you trust the other person to do what they said they're going to do. So this isn't about being trustworthy, which let's just assume that's important because it is.
Sure.
So this is, what do you convey to the other person? I have to say that after I finished my Ph.D. and before I became a professor, I worked in a management consulting firm. I eventually became a partner in the firm. And, I was one who really in the beginning micromanaged my team because I didn't really know what else to do. And that's really de-energizing. And what I realized much later on was that what I was conveying by micromanaging is that I didn't trust them to do their work.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
I've been there. Yes.
So that's another. So a third one is task enabling, which means enabling another person to be successful at what they're trying to do. It doesn't mean doing their job for them, but it could be being a sounding board, giving advice when they ask, finding a resource if they ask for it. So that's a part that I really focus on. So some of the tools that we've developed and I write about in my new book, All You Have to Do Is Ask, is about task enabling by mobilizing the resources that you in your networks. And it's all about getting people to ask for what they need, and then people are generous in response to that. Mm-hmm. And then the fourth one is play, or you can think about it as play with an instrumental purpose or without an instrumental purpose. And a good example of that would be, Southwest Airlines. They have stewards who will wrap the safety announcements, right? And do all kinds of fun little things.
Like Southwest, yeah. It's totally awesome, yeah.
Yeah, so I bring up the idea of play with some of my students who are working in big companies. I said, do you ever have fun at work? And they're like, what? Yeah. Fun at work, Then, well, but about celebrate. So we start every meeting at our center with a round of celebrations of something, something good, something interesting, something you want to share.
Yeah.
And that no matter what the meeting, we always start it that way.
Yeah, we started doing that finally. We do wins at the beginning of our team meeting. One win. Everybody's got to report one win.
Yeah.
Cool. And these are four, how would you frame these? Four?
So you think of it as 4 pathways or 4 elements of high quality connections.
Awesome. I love those. Yo, I'm interrupting to remind you of our relationship coach training. Our relationship coaches, I think, are incredible human beings and are very skilled. We take pride and good care in training these coaches from all over the world. Here's what one of our coaches, Anna, had to say about her experience in our trainings.
Hi, my name is Anna. I graduated from the Relationship School's Level 1 Coaching Training Program, also known as RCT, 2 years ago. And I currently coach couples and individuals who want to have thriving and long-lasting romantic relationships. There is a lot I learned in the RCT program. The main 3 things are, first, I learned how to help people in a healthy way, meaning without fixing, rescuing, or enabling, which I used to do a lot, especially with my family and friends. The second thing, I learned how we all need the right amount of support and challenge in order to grow. I used to be very much of a supporter and had to learn how to bring out the challenger in me in a way that is natural and of service to others. And the third one, I learned how to hold the space and be with my own discomfort when my clients are feeling activated. This has been very helpful not only when coaching, but also with my partner in my own romantic relationship whenever we've had conflicts. Doing the RCT program changed my life in a big way. For years before RCT, I knew I wanted to change careers and do work that is more meaningful. And in RCT, I got the tools, the skills, the practice, and more important, the confidence to do that after seeing results in real clients. 6 months ago, I quit my full-time job so I can build my own coaching practice. And this has been my dream come true for a long, long time.
All right, amazing. Anna is hailing from Mexico City, now living in Seattle. She's one of our bilingual relationship coaches. You can hire her at relationshipschool.com/coaching. And if you want to check out our relationship coach training, go to relationshipschool.com/RCT. All right, back to the podcast. If we come back to, I'm just kind of going to jump around a little bit. You also teach and write about values. Describe that. Like I'm familiar with several different value frames, and I'd love to know what you mean by values and why this is important in teams and in social interactions and networking.
Well, if you think about the concept of team culture or even team resilience, it has to do with a number of things. One is practices. How do we interact with each other? What kind of practice do we use to enable each other? But another is, what are our norms and values? So a norm would be an expectation of behavior. A value is a standard of behavior. Now, sometimes those are different, right? There could be the espoused value, but the norm is actually something different. But it's important to think very I think, openly and clearly about, what are your values? What are your value priorities? So like with my MBA students, one of the exercises we'll do was say, okay, here's a bunch of cards and they have different values. And I want you to sort these according to what's really important to you. And for some people, family is the most important value. For others, it's making money. For yet others, it could be happiness or creativity or autonomy. And so it's important to know what are those key values that you have as an individual or as a team, that we have as a team, because those are our standards that we want to hold up to. So then we could say, okay, when we do a particular thing, are we upholding, are we living that value, or are we violating that value?
Okay. And then, so with, again, if we look at, let's say, I guess, let me ask you again, and then I'll ask you a question. What are the most common values that people tend to report in terms of priorities?
Well, I'd say there's often a tension between work and family. And so for some people, family is more important as a value than work. Sometimes it's the other way around. Money always comes up. For some people, it would be in their top 10, and others it would not be in their top 10. I often see fulfillment, autonomy, creativity as being an important value that will come up.
Yeah. Okay. And then as we have a hard time getting along, like pre-COVID-19 and pre George Floyd's murder, it seemed like we were already having a hard time getting along. A lot of us are getting along well, and just really there's a lot of synergy and people are doing great. But it can be easy to see where we're not doing so well together. And now we've got heightened stress, right? 30 million people have lost their jobs or whatever. There's this really just tragic incident with George Floyd, and then the riots as a kind of a result of that. There's COVID-19 where we're wearing masks and we're supposed to be 6 feet apart. There's just a lot here, stress related between us, right? And I'm curious, like, how does values tie in? Do we start competing or fighting, and is that what we're really fighting about, is our values, or what? What would you say about this?
Well, when it comes to wearing masks, for example, and I'd mentioned before that I really learned from the segment that you did on mask shaming. So I see some people wear masks, some people don't. I do, out of a sense of, if I wouldn't want to infect anyone else, right? But I understand that there are valid reasons why people would not want to wear a mask. It could be that, they're unemployed. This is a point that you had made, and that, they're making a statement that if they're wearing masks, it's just going to delay the whole stay-at-home orders, for example. Yeah. So you could see, but to recognize that there are different values. I think what has become inflamed with the killing of George Floyd is, some of the value differences that we have, in a sense that we're not living up to the values that we hold dear as Americans. That we have a value of equality, we have a value of human life. But it's really clear that in lots of ways we fall short. We're not living up to that. Yeah. In a way, you could think about it as that we have the values. Remember, I said values are standards of behavior, where norms are expectations, and they can be very different. If there's that standard of behavior, that standard of equality, it just really shows that, for a lot of systemic reasons, we are not living up to that value. Our institutions are not supporting that value. Right. And I think at a higher level, that's what people want to have happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Per your kind of ownership with your friend many years ago, I'm just coming from that place asking the question, so what do we do? What are you sort of advising that we do, given that that's going on?
Well, I think the important thing to do is to engage with other people in figuring out what to do. Being silent is a decision itself. That's doing something, which is doing nothing. It's like you've got to do something. Doing nothing is doing something. And so I think it's important to reach out, whatever group you're a part of. It could be your family, it could be a work group, it could be friends, it could be community. For me, it's our Center for Positive Organizations, thinking about, well, what can we do as a group? What can we do as an institution? In this case, as a center, in our case, for example, like, what do we know about the research? And so we've been thinking about, well, how can we compile research that would be relevant and helpful for these issues? How can we, we're working on what statement will we make? It's important to make a statement, as in our University of Michigan has made statements. So some of them have been, have been read all over, the one by key administrators and so forth. And I think it's important to make a statement and to make a stand of what your values are, what you stand for.
Yeah.
But then I think it's also important to think about action. Think about what can you do? What can you do individually? What can you do as a team, as a group, as a center? And I have to say, they don't have the answers. We're trying to figure that out ourselves right now, but we're engaged in the conversation and there's energy behind figuring out something that we can do that will be constructive, that'll be a part of the dialogue, but also part of the solution.
Yeah, totally. That's great. Yeah, I like the thing about making a statement. That's really helpful as an organization, where you stand. That's kind of sort of standing in your values there. And taking action, right? Like doing something, engaging in dialogue, and engaging in conversation, asking questions, doing something. Yeah, just want to totally agree with that. Are there, tying this into the home, because before we hit record, we were talking about the home front and how a lot of what you talk about, you need to live at home perhaps, and tie it into maybe values at home and also just the sort of maybe the culture that we need to create. And it starts really with us, the person in the mirror, and then perhaps our family. It's like, how are we being the change that we want to see in the world, or are we complaining out there and then behaving differently at home? Will you help us just tie that into the home front?
Yeah, so we talked before about the concept of high quality connections and the 4 elements or pathways. Well, those apply at home as well. So, when I have an 18-year-old teenager who's been cooped up at home for the last couple of months. And, I need to be sensitive to how difficult that is. I mean, it's hard for me, it's hard for my wife as well, but it's really hard for him. Give him some slack, give him some leeway, but I also engage him in the conversation about what's going on in the world. We've talked about George Floyd and what that means. We've talked about today. We had to go to his high school to pick up. They're going to have a virtual commencement, but they had the yearbook and a cap and gown and other things to pick up, and they had very strict rules, which I thought were really important. That you don't open your windows. Everyone in the car has a mask on. You pop your trunk. They'll put stuff in. They're all wearing masks and gloves.
Yeah.
Right. It's seeing that, and so when we drove from that, we had a conversation about that, what that meant. That they were doing that and that we were also doing it, how in other parts of our state, other parts of the country, people are not doing that for a whole variety of reasons. But some of them have to do with politics. Some of them have to do with economic situation. There's a lot of reasons behind it, but we engage in those conversations. So I think it's as appropriate, given the age and maturity of the children or teenagers that we have, is to discuss what's going on in the world. Yeah. And that, and there's a lot of tough stuff going on in the world, and to realize that also that through their phones and their computers, they have a window that they actually know so much of what's actually going on out there.
Yeah.
It's rare that now I can bring up something that he doesn't know about already.
Right.
But that we have those conversations. We have conversations about values, about what's right. What can we do? What can he do as a young adult, for example?
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. I'm curious also about back to the workplace. I know I'm kind of shuttling around here. What advice do you have for sort of leaders of organizations right now in terms of culture? You sort of already spoke to a few things, but if there was just one piece of advice for people in a position of power, a CEO, a leader, a boss, a manager, what would you say?
Well, if you come back to that idea of acknowledging reality, I think every leader should acknowledge the pandemic. Every leader should acknowledge the strife in our country, the killing of George Floyd. But even to say, look, you can say, I don't know what to do, but I want to acknowledge that's out there, that's here, that's a part of our lives. And when I'm ready, I'm going to make a statement about it. Because if a leader doesn't do that, it leaves everyone wondering what's happening. Why is this person not acknowledging that?
Yeah.
So I think that's the first step, is to acknowledge it, and even to admit that you don't know what the answers are. And then the next step would just be, okay, well, what does it mean inside of our organization? It could be in terms of training that we might engage with, or dialogue that we might engage in, to look at the composition of one's workforce. Look at the composition of those who are at the highest ranks, and have a conversation about that, and what is our value there? What would we like to have? What would we like to see? And what might be some steps that we could start taking to move in that direction?
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, these are all helpful reminders for me too, as a business owner. Thank you. Just wrapping up here, I got a couple more questions for you, Wayne. I ask every guest, one of our missions here at the Relationship School is to reach 1 million teens and young adults with relationship education, so kids know how to work out their differences, because that matters to me in terms of making a better world. And if I had 1,000, say, high school students, and I could only share one thing with them, and you were whispering in my ear, and it was about relationships, what would you want me to tell them?
I would tell them to ask for what they need, to not be afraid, to be vulnerable, to express that you have needs, that you need help, for example, that you need advice, that when you don't have an answer to a question, that you raise your hand and you ask a question. I think it's one of the things that gets drummed out of students when they're young, and to not express your questions, your uncertainties, what you might need. I think that is, I think it's very important to do that sort of thing. So it would be to do that. And then on the other side is to be generous and to respond to other people, to look for opportunities to help them, especially if they voice a request or a need that they might have. So I think that's a way of engaging. We talked before about social capital and resources in relationships, but in a very concrete way, every relationship is a two-way street. And thinking about, in a relationship, what does the other person need? And to be generous at helping that person meet those needs, but then to also to voice your needs so the other person knows what those are, and maybe together co-create something that works better for the two of you. I think that's true between, an intimate relationship between a parent and a child, teachers and students. I think that's a principle that applies across all kinds of relationships.
Yeah, awesome. Amazing reminders, yeah. Own your needs, something we teach a lot here at the Relationship School. Cool. Tell us about your new book and where we can find you, Wayne.
Well, thanks, Jason. The book is called All You Have to Do Is Ask, and you could find it just by Googling that. There's a lot of free resources. I have an assessment that's in the book, but you can do a free version of it on the website at allyouhavetodoisask.com. There's a learning map. Our podcast will be up there once it's released and so forth. So a lot of resources for it. But the key idea is that the secret to generosity is getting people to ask for what they need. So we learned long ago through our research and our experience with companies is that most people were willing to help and to be generous, but most people struggle with making a request for what they need. And so the book that's all you have to do is ask. It turns out that the request or the ask is the trigger to the giving, receiving cycle. It's the way in which resources start moving through a network. Think about it. No one can help you if you don't tell them what you need. Right. And so the book addresses that at the individual level, what you can do as an individual, what you can do as a team or a team leader, and what you can do as an organization. All the different practices and tools that will enable you to, as an individual, a team, or an organization, to be more productive, to be more effective, to be more satisfied, to be happier.
Yeah, awesome. Someone's got to get that energy exchange going, right? And so you're saying, ask, ask for
Yeah.
help.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah.
allows
I mean,
someone else to be generous, right?
absolutely. And you think about it, there's two kinds of positive emotions that are created in that. So if I'm vulnerable and I said, look, I have this need, I have this request, can you help me out? And you help me. And then, well, you feel, that warm glow of helping a person. It feels good to help. And I feel the positive emotions of gratitude for the help that I received from you. And what we have found through our research is that gratitude for help received will motivate me to pay it forward and help other people. Of course, so I'd want to pay back and help you, but it also motivates me helping people who haven't helped me yet. And that's one of the engines that starts moving energy and resources through a network.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. Okay, and where can people find you? What's the URL website?
It's the title of the book, All You Have to Do Is Ask.com. You can also find me at my website, which is waynebaker.org, or on LinkedIn.
Okay, awesome. Wayne Baker, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for what you're doing in the world and for being with us and sharing your wisdom today.
Well, thank you, Jason. I appreciate the opportunity, and you're doing important work.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks. All right, WayneBaker.org, or all you have to do is ask.com to get his new book. And I really loved what he said there at the end, right, about the exchange. So here's your action step. Along with Wayne's advice, just ask one person for something you need today. And see if it does what he's suggesting, which is the other person is invited into generosity. So if you're already not getting your needs met in your relationship, don't ask a person who you know is going to roll their eyes, make fun of you, disrespect you. That's not what we're talking about. Go to a friend who actually would show up for you and take a risk and be vulnerable and ask for what you need, okay? And then debrief that with that person. Hey, that was really vulnerable for me. I can't believe I did that. That was scary, or gosh, that felt really good to ask for what I need and to have you show up for me. All right, take one action step like that today. Could be something very small. Will you read this email? Will you walk with me? Will you listen to me while I bitch about something? Will you make me dinner? Will you send me a text at 2:00 reminding me to work out? There could be a number of things we can ask a friend to do for us. Okay, try that out. All right, and then again, our coaching program is slowly filling up. We'd love to see you in here. Relationshipschool.com/RCT. There is no prerequisite anymore. There used to be quite the gnarly, burly, amazing prerequisite, and now there isn't one. Okay, although you do have to interview with me. I interview every single person that comes into the program, and I want to make sure you're a good fit. Okay, relationshipschool.com/RCT. If you've ever thought about being a relationship coach and creating a career where you are helping others for the rest of your life, like the world needs more helpers out there effectively helping folks work through their differences, you could be one of those people, okay? All right, hope to see you in the training, and we'll see you next time on the podcast. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Share one of these videos with a friend. We want to help the planet get their act together around relationships, and you are one of them, so thank you.